You are listening to Lyndsey's story, a daughter with hearing loss and bilateral cochlear implants on the Child Life On Call podcast.
And when the audiologist came back into the room, I could tell by the look on her face that something was definitely not right. And she had told us that, her findings were that she had severe to profound hearing loss. Hearing aids probably weren't really going to help her. Of course, the minute you hear that, you just get emotional. I just started bawling. I just didn't know how to respond.
Today on the podcast, we will hear from Lyndsey. She will be talking about her daughter who has hearing loss and what their experience with cochlear implants has been like. Lyndsey, who is originally from northern Minnesota, met her husband when he was visiting there. They have since moved to Austin and have a full house, 2 kiddos, Jason and Vivian, a dog, and a cat. Lyndsey begins her story by talking to us about the day that Vivian was born and the newborn hearing test that all infants go through in the hospital.
So Vivian was born on March 13th of 2016. She was not very far away from her due date, about 10 days away. And needless to say, the labor and delivery process for her was actually really, really quick. We had her hearing testing done in the hospital, and she had failed the first time. And I wasn't really worried about it because my son had failed in the hospital too. And I was like, well, no, he failed one time, and then he did it again, and he passed. And so they came to do it a second time. She failed that time. But again, I wasn't, super worried because they had told me it could be fluid in her ears. She was born fast. That's just not something you should worry about. But please do come back in 10 days and we can retest her and go from there. And so I brought her back 10 days later, and then she failed again. And so at that point, I was like, okay, something's going on. Something's not right. And so we scheduled another screening. This time it was an ABR, which is a sedated test for children who are older. But since Vivian was only about 4 weeks at the time, she didn't need to be sedated. We brought her to the hospital. She had the testing done. During the testing, I was holding her and she was sleeping. And in the middle of the testing, I could hear the little microphones they put in their ears. And in addition, they have little things on their forehead to kind of measure the brain waves going through their brain. And during the test, I started to hear the clicks. And she wasn't flinching. She wasn't moving. Nothing was happening. And I was like thinking to myself, something's not right. And so sure enough, they, kept doing the testing. I kept asking questions and like, we're going to get our results and we'll come back and talk to you. And I waited. It felt like it was the longest 10 minutes in my life for them to come back. And when the audiologist came back into the room, I could tell by the look on her face that something was definitely not right. And she had told us that, her findings were that she had severe to profound hearing loss, and hearing aids probably weren't really going to help her. Of course, the minute you hear that, you just get emotional. I just started bawling. I just didn't know how to respond. And, my husband actually was not even there at that appointment because, we thought she would maybe have like mild to moderate hearing loss and, hearing aids might be an option. We were kind of prepared for that, but I don't think anything really prepares you for hearing those words, and that hearing aids weren't going to work. And most people aren't really aware of this, but children who are deaf, about 93% of their parents are hearing parents. It's not a very common thing for deaf children to have parents who are deaf. And so it was a complete shock to us and our family, finding out the initial news, and was a lot to process. But at that appointment, it was the first time that I'd ever heard of cochlear implants. And, after getting all the information, and I was like information overload, trying to go home and start to process. And it took a while to kind of come to the decision, and it was a lot. It was a lot of information.
Yeah, that's a lot to deal with. How did you and your husband kind of balance learning that information? Are you both researchers, or does one do more than the other, or how did that work?
So I would say we are both really big on research, of course. And so the first thing, of course, we do is we get home and, and we invite our family over, his parents, and, we tell them the news. And of course, the first thing we do is we start researching everything. And the worst thing is you're like, okay, she has hearing loss or she's deaf, and is there something more that's wrong? So the research can be both a positive thing and a negative thing, because we should not use Google as a doctor is what I've learned. But it can be really overwhelming doing research, because then you start reading about other disorders or other things that might, be going on. And so I guess that was a positive thing, because I got to see, the positive effects of what a cochlear implant, how that would work, what that would look like for her, if that was something that we chose to do. And it was just really overwhelming, even just doing the research and seeing how many other disorders and things that could potentially be associated with her hearing loss.
Sure, definitely. For those of us who don't know much about what cochlear implants are, or what they do, or what the process is like, can you help explain that to us?
Of course. So the cochlear implant there is a small device about the size of a quarter, and it has, this is the best way to describe it in layman's terms, about the size of a quarter, and there's 2 electrodes that are attached to it. And so it gets implanted in the brain, and one of the electrodes gets fed through the cochlea to send signals to the cochlea. So if someone is deaf, typically speaking, what happens is the cells that are in the cochlea, they don't exist, or there are no little tiny ear hairs for the sound to move through. So what the part that goes to the cochlea does is it, feeds through, there's a little tiny piece of material, and on that piece of material it has 22 electrodes, and those all are different pitches of sound. And then the other one gets pointed towards the auditory nerve in the brain.
Okay, gotcha. And so does that go in like with a surgical implant, or what's the process? So, she's 4 weeks old, you find out this information, you learn about cochlear implants. What was the process like after that?
So the process after that is actually a long process, and I talked to other parents that are going through the same thing that we did. In order to become a candidate, there's a lot of hoops you have to jump through. So after we found out, they were like, there might be a wait, just depending on what the caseload's like for the doctor. And so we actually had to get a lot of testing done. She had to have a repeat ABR screen just to confirm her hearing loss. We had to test her kidneys to make sure there was nothing wrong with her kidneys, that they were functioning well, because there are other disorders and diseases associated with that. She had to also go to a cardiologist to get her heart checked out. She also had to have an MRI done to make sure that her auditory nerve was in good working order, because that's one of the vital parts, of course, for the cochlear implant to work. And so it was a really long process getting there. I always tell parents it's all about the process for that. And as soon as you get to that day, that surgery day, it's just crazy, because after the surgery, you're going for a couple follow-up appointments. There's a lot involved after the surgery, but then after that, everything kind of just slows down and falls into place the way it should. But she had her surgery in February 1st to be exact, and the surgery it was long. It was about 5 hours, and they did 1 ear at a time, but they were so gracious to call us after 1 ear was done, just to let us know everything was going well. And it was probably the longest 5 hours of my life. I did everything that I could to distract myself. I brought my computer, did some work, all kinds of, just trying to distract myself to try not to focus on it or worry about it. And when we saw her in the recovery room, she was super puffy and swollen, and they gave her her Princess Leia headband, as I call it, just to help with the healing process. Because when they go in for the surgery, they make small incisions behind the ears, and then they have to go in and very, very, very carefully thread that little piece through each of the cochleas. That part is probably what took the surgeon the longest time, because you want it to be a good fit, and babies are little, and so going slow is really important for that part of the procedure. But after she got in the recovery room, she woke up we started really early in the morning, so we started process at about 6:30 in the morning. She started her surgery at 7:30. She was out by 12:30, and then by about 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, she finally perked up pretty good and was awake and was smiling, and I was completely amazed by the next day, and she just was almost back to her normal self, which was crazy. Kids are super resilient, and she's definitely a trooper.
Wow. So, what do they tell you about what to expect or the expectations associated with getting the cochlear implant? Is it something that cures her hearing loss? Is it something that's a gradual process? What is that like?
So it's actually a really involved process. So the best hearing, so most people hear, I mean, at about 15. I mean, like if you have some hearing loss, I mean, let's say you go to a lot of concerts or you're exposed to a lot of loud noise, it's likely that you might have some hearing loss at between about 10 to 15 decibels. Um, with a cochlear implant, the best hearing you can get is at about 15 decibels, which is actually really good. So it's pretty much 85% hearing for the most part. And so what they do is you have to wait about 3 weeks, which that seemed like the longest 3 weeks of my life, waiting for her incisions to heal. And then they go in for an activation. And what they do is you have all the parts for the cochlear implant. There's a couple different styles that we got to choose from. But the one that she wears, the one that we picked, there's a magnet on each side of her head, and that is what magnetizes the coil to the back of her head, and that's what essentially clicks sound through into her brain. And there's also a little microphone. So it looks very similar to a hearing aid, the piece does that she wears. And we actually put them in a headband, which makes it super easy for toddlers. And so we went on February 23rd to get that done. And so what they do at that appointment is they go through and they test every single electrode with different beeps. And so during that time, she was starting to hear beeps, and then they were like, okay, we're gonna turn them on. She might cry, she might, be happy. You just don't know what to expect. And so we turned them on. They turned them on, and we started talking to her, and her face just lit up, and she got kind of a smile on her face. Her eyes got really big, and she turned towards us when we were talking to her. And so we were just so overjoyed. I mean, as a parent, I literally just never thought the day would come. Like, I didn't know if they were going to work. I mean, I saw all these other people and their experiences that they had with their children. I talked to lots of families, and I just feel like you just don't know. I mean, you hope and you pray that the surgery will work and everything will work out the way it's supposed to, but I didn't know until that day. And so, just seeing that as a parent and her being able to hear your voice, it was such a big deal to us. It was a very emotional time.
Oh my gosh, I can imagine like what a difference from the first hearing test at 4 weeks to this one. It's just total opposites, and how wonderful that must have been.
It was really, really wonderful. And the big part I tell parents is, you have all these appointments, you have all of these things that you're going through to get to the point, but it's what happens after is what's important. And so we do therapy with her pretty much all day, every day thing. We do what's called auditory verbal therapy with Vivian. And so she sees her therapist about twice a month, but most of it is work for the parents and her caregivers. And so we make our environment home a very oral environment where we're pointing out and explaining things and talking to her, exposing her to different songs and different language, all kinds of different words. We try to expose her language, and we do sign language with her too. And so she does sign a lot of basic baby signs and lots of animals, and that's been lots of fun, seeing her learn the sign language and getting excited when she sees something and saying it and seeing it and signing. And it's definitely been a process, and we've learned a lot through it. And the biggest thing I tell parents is that you are your biggest advocate for your child, and that you really just have to, if you feel like you're led to do something in a specific way, you should definitely do it. And, research about it, talk to professionals about it, because it was not an easy decision for us to come to the choice of, giving her a cochlear implant. It can be very controversial, especially in the deaf community. And I just honestly, at the end of the day, we just wanted to give her the best chance that we could. So if she, wants to be in the hearing world and wants to speak, we wanted to give her the best opportunity possible. And we'll want to definitely teach her some more sign language as she gets older, but we're really focused on the oral part of it right now. And it's definitely been a long process, and it's going to continue to be a process really over the years. And just teaching her to listen and pointing out sounds for her, and just seeing her face light up when she hears a song, or when she, even if she says a new word, it's like a big deal. Every time she says a new word, I literally start crying because I never thought it was going to happen.
Oh, yeah, it's so true. So many of us take for granted, you know, our child's smile when they hear a song that they know or a word that they know, and like how incredible those moments really are.
It was really hard, especially when she was, you know, a baby, and you're like wanting to sing to her, like she's fussy, and you wanting to sing to her, and of course she can't hear anything, and it's kind of almost heartbreaking in a way. It's like, oh, like I just want to soothe you with my voice, but I can't because she can't hear. So there were other things that, you know, that we did. She's very snuggly child, but I will tell you, she is a spitfire. She definitely holds her own. She's very independent. She wants to do everything herself, which I think is really good. She's a very, very, very social child with other children. She loves to play with other children. Like I said, her and her brother, they're 22 months apart. And so they can be best friends one minute, and the next minute they might be what you would say frenemies. They're arguing over a toy, and just to even see her argue and tell him no, I mean, that in itself, just getting excited about your child saying no, might seem kind of silly to some people, like they're in that no phase, but I just get really excited even when I hear her say no to her brother. It's honestly been so amazing just getting to see her develop. And this past week, we actually did some booth testing just to kind of see where she was at, what level she was hearing at. And her booth test revealed that she's hearing between 20 to 30 decibels, which is really good for only hearing for a couple of months. And really it can get just a little bit better than that. And for her only being 19 months old and her hearing that well, she's definitely off to a great start.
What did that test entail? Was it similar like the hearing test that you guys had been through before, so you were kind of accustomed with what to expect and how you could support her?
It was a little bit different than that. So it was booth testing. So booth testing is where your child goes into a booth that is completely silent, and there's a couple speakers in there, and they will read off some of the Lyndsey sounds like ah, e, oo, and they'll try to get her attention and just kind of, and also put them at different pitch levels to see where she's turning, see if she's mimicking any of the sounds. And it was really neat to see her do that and see her recognize some of the sounds. And for that one that we did this past week, I actually wasn't in there because I can be a distraction sometimes, and we want her to be as pretty much as bored as possible during that, so we can get good responses since she is young and very distractible.
Right. I can imagine that's hard with a toddler.
Yes, it's really hard some days. Like this today, for an example, she at first, I will definitely say we really struggled to keep the implants on her because I don't really feel like she knew what they meant or what they were really for. I mean, she was hearing the sound, but still she was fairly young, so she was still trying, I feel like understanding, like, what are these doing for me? Why am I wearing them? And I feel like once she started to recognize sound, she started wanting to wear them more and more and more. And now it's actually to the point where if she takes them off, or if, she sometimes will play with them because she's a toddler, she will actually come bring them to us and point to her head and ask us to put them back on her. She wants to hear, which is like the sweetest thing ever. But it can be a challenge sometimes because there's lots of little pieces and parts, and she likes to pull them apart. She's super curious.
Wow, she sounds really smart. How did your son handle all of this? And I guess not only having to adjust to a new sibling or having to deal with you guys going to different doctor's appointments and him not going, how did all that work?
It was definitely a lot on him, and I don't really feel like I, felt that it was a lot until just recently when I actually was like, oh, things are starting to slow down now. And, during that time, we especially made a point to do things one-on-one with him, whether it be I take him out to just go to a restaurant or go to Chick-fil-A and go play in the play place, and just taking the time to just spend some one-on-one time with him. I think that was probably a really big thing that we did. He's also very involved with things that we do with Vivian. He's actually been to part of a therapy session before with her. He knows all of the different sounds that we do with her and different words that we're working on in songs. So he's also a really good speech model for her, and we just try to involve him in all the process as much as we could. And that he even came to the hospital to see her when she was there. He didn't quite understand because he just turned 3 in May, so it was just right before he turned 3. But he could understand, I think, more than we thought he could, and we're just explaining to him. And now, I mean, we call her cochlear implants her ears, and so I was like, okay, what did he do with her ears? And he's like, oh, let me find her ears, and let me help you put them on. And so and the interesting thing was too, before we got the cochlear implants and kind of decided to go that route, she had hearing aids. And he was particularly curious about, the hearing aids, and he wanted to wear them too. He hasn't done that quite yet with the cochlear implants, but I think he's starting to understand more. But I just always tell parents, if you can involve your child in any way, whether it be, just spending one-on-one time with them while you're going through something like this, is just so impactful to them. It just needs extra love.
Oh, and I love what you did with including him in the therapeutic part of it too, and having him know some of the words and be involved, because really that benefits your daughter and your son, and they can do it together.
Yeah, no, it's really funny. We have a game that Vivian loves. We call it the bead game. And so pretty much what it is a bottle full of beads with water. And we do different sounds, lots of speech babble sounds. And so we might do ah-ee, or ooh, ooh, ooh. And sometimes he'll be like, no, it's my turn. I get to pick the sound this time. And so we let him do that. And then she'll copy his sound. And then she'll do a sound and he'll copy it. And so just getting him involved really at any level, it's fun for him. And he feels like he's a part of the process too.
What would you say were and are some of the hardest parts about having a child who has hearing loss or these cochlear implants?
I think some of the hardest parts about it are a lot of people don't know about cochlear implants, honestly. People will give us funny looks out in public, and I'm just like, why don't you just ask us questions rather than giving us funny looks? Because I'm so more than happy to share about our experience and how we came to the decision and what they are. I just wish people would ask rather than stare and give funny looks, because most people don't know what those are. Children will come to her or come to me like, what does she have on her head? What are those? And I'm like, well, Vivian can't hear without them, and those are her super bionic ears or her magic ears or her special ears. And she uses those to listen. Without them, she can't hear. She's deaf. And so I just really, one thing that I recommend, and I do more now so that I'm a parent of a child that has some different special needs. I think I'm always a lot more sensitive to that. I want to ask questions rather than give funny looks. I think that's definitely been a challenge. I think also one of our other biggest challenges has been just like feeling like, are you doing enough? Like, or what you're doing, is it enough? Is it working? Like, is she going to get caught up? I think the biggest thing for me is that there's just still a lot of unknown. She's 19 months old. She's doing great. She's catching up with her peers. Our goal is to have her mainstream, but if we don't, that's not a big deal. I mean, it'll work itself out. But there's just so much unknown for the future. I think that's probably the hardest part for me. I'm a big planner.
Can you describe some of the misconceptions that coming along with a child who has cochlear implants?
I think the biggest misconception that people have, especially with children, who have even that are deaf or hearing loss. I think everybody who thinks that has a child that has hearing loss, that they're deaf, that they must have deafness run in their family. Their parents must be deaf, but that's just not the case. I feel like that's probably the biggest misconception. People always ask me, does it run in your family? Do you have like a distant relative that's deaf? And we don't. We don't really know what the cause of her hearing loss was. We know that she doesn't appear to be syndromic in any way. We will probably have genetic testing when she gets to be a little bit older, but I feel like that's probably the biggest misconception is people are just really, it must run in your family, or, nope, she's just deaf and she's the only one, and we don't know why, but it's just one of those things that you just have to learn to be okay with and accept.
What would you say has helped you the most as her mom in dealing with all this?
I definitely feel like the support of my work family, my friends, and especially, just other people out there in the cochlear implant community and deaf community both. We started, when she was probably like 7 or 8 weeks old, we had ECI start coming out to our house and start spending time with her and signing with her even when she was little. And so that helped out a lot. It helped answer a lot of my questions I had about the deaf community, about how, things in the school district work. A lot of those questions that I kind of had looming in my mind at first, it really helped out a lot. And, just talking to a lot of other parents that have gone through the same thing or hearing their stories has been so helpful. I feel like it's not a very common thing, and it's really easy to feel alone. And if you can form a support network of people that are going to just listen to you on your hard days and give you advice as you need it, and really just people that are going to encourage you to advocate for your children. That was definitely something that helped me. One of my bosses actually really encouraged me. She's like, "No, Lyndsey, you need to keep being persistent and, keep calling the doctors if, you're not getting appointments quick enough," because that was one of the things that we struggled with. It was a little bit difficult to get into the doctor that we wanted to see that does the cochlear implants. And so I called pretty much every day for about 2 weeks until I was able to get an appointment that wasn't 4 months out. And so just having those people that are going to be your cheerleaders, people that are going to cheer you on and support you throughout the process, I can't stress enough of how important that has been to me.
Right. And I think you've touched on this a lot already, but I guess if you could see another parent who's, at that 4-week-old appointment and getting the same news you got, is there something that you would tell them?
I would tell them that as hard as it may seem, it's going to be okay. As I think I would have loved to have somebody just tell me it's going to be okay. It doesn't seem like it is right now because it's so overwhelming to get so many options put in front of you, from hearing aids to, methods of communication. That was a big thing for us. Like people were like, "Oh, are you going to sign with her? Are you going to do total communication, which is both spoken language and sign language? Are you going to be oral?" There's just so many choices when it comes to having a child who's deaf. And that's definitely been one of my biggest obstacles. And so I would really encourage other parents to just do their research, talk to other people, really just talk to especially those parents that are going through it too and kind of what their thought process was. I am a part of a group called Texas Hands and Voices, and I got put in contact with them right away, probably when I was about 6 or 7 weeks old. And they had someone who actually reached out to me, another parent who had their child that was implanted. And I just was able to ask them whatever questions I wanted to. And that was really, really helpful for me at first. I guess the biggest thing is just know that you're not alone, even though you may feel alone. There's other people out there that are going through what you're going through. They might just not live close to you. And so one thing that I've done is I've definitely made a presence on a couple of the cochlear implant boards that are out there. There's so many support groups and so many groups of people out there that just want to help each other. And it's a lot to go through. It's a lot emotionally. And there's so many decisions that need to be made in a short amount of time. And my best advice is to just find those people that, are your cheerleaders and find your support network. That's really, at the end of the day, what the most important thing is.
If you could describe what Vivian has taught you through this experience, what would it be?
She has taught me probably more about myself than I ever thought she would. Just more about, standing up for yourself. And the fact that, we just really had every step we just had to push and, fight to get to that, that surgery day. It was a lot of appointments and a lot of just very trying to get through the first really couple of months, just the processing part of it. But the biggest thing that she's really taught me is joy. She's just always, even before she was implanted, she's just the happiest child. And she's happy all the time. I couldn't ask for a more happy. She's just literally the most happiest person. I don't think I've ever met anyone more happier than my daughter. I know that's kind of biased, but she's just a joyful person. She sees joy in the small things, and she's just taught me that, life is short. Enjoy everything, because it all goes by really, really fast. And she's definitely a fighting spirit.
Are there any specific resources? I know you mentioned the Texas Hand and Voices, but are there any other resources that you would recommend to a parent?
I would definitely, if you are considering cochlear implants or if you're thinking about that being an option for your child, and don't get me wrong, your child doesn't have to be, a baby. Let's say they're older and you decide that maybe you want to give them opportunity to hear. I would definitely encourage going on to Facebook, and there's a couple really great parent groups, cochlear implant parents of cochlear kids. There's a couple really great groups on there that have a lot of great resources. And parents are just really able to be honest on there and be like, I'm having problems with this, my little one won't keep their ears on. Or you have families that are just still like in the research part of it and they're just not sure if it's the right choice for their family. And they're just going on there to ask questions about like, what do you think of this? Or, what would you do if this came up? And so everybody on there is just so incredibly helpful. And it's been a huge resource for me. And so I definitely encourage becoming a part of those groups as well.
Thank you so much to Lyndsey for sharing your story with our listeners today. And another big thank you goes out to Laura Morsman Photography for the amazing photos of Lyndsey and her family. If you live in Austin, go book Laura Morsman Photography to capture beautiful moments of you and your family. If you'd like to get in touch with Lyndsey and have any questions for her about her experience or the resources she mentioned, get in touch with me at info@childlifepodcast.com and I will connect you with her. I will link to the Texas Hands and Voices resource that Lyndsey mentioned in the show notes page. Thanks so much for tuning into the Child Life On Call podcast this week. And as always, I look forward to connecting with you on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Make sure you're following along. See you all next week.